So I know the Judas Contract was on my hit list for this series, but Death in the Family is a Jason Todd story, and I have a lot of feelings, most of which stem from the injustice this character has received. Most of you will know the famous story of how Jason Todd was killed by the fans, but on the off chance you don't, when the Death in the Family storyline was being written, an editor named Dennis O'Neil decided to give fans the choice as to whether or not Jason lived. Why? Basically, people didn't like Jason. One, because he replaced Dick Grayson as Robin, and I can't stress this enough, everybody loved Dick. One of these days I'm gonna stop doing that. And two, he was a problem child, shall we say. He was angry, he talked back, he didn't do as he was told, he was just all round difficult. So readers of the time, especially parents, didn't like him. And all I can say to those people is, what is wrong with you? Are you just simple-minded or are you completely lacking in empathy? Jason was the son of a drug addict and a small-time crook who most likely had to take care of his mother from a very young age.
Hey guys, yeah, little thing. As often happens with me, I think I've mixed up my timelines. The whole thing about Jason's mother being a drug addict was added later. I think I've conflated pre-crisis and post-crisis. In these earlier comics, Catherine Todd just died of an illness, not an overdose. So, yeah, my bad, guys.
And ended up having to fend for himself on the streets of the most violent and dangerous city in the developed world before he was even a teenager. Of course he's angry. Of course he has problems. Due to the criminals and the corrupt cops in Gotham, especially in the area Jason comes from, of course he has to learn to defend himself with violence. Of course he has issues with authority. But this came at a time where having a more open and emotional relationship with children had still not slipped its way fully into our society's consciousness. In the 70s, psychologists were just starting to promote the ideas of child rearing we live by today, and in the 80s when this comic book was published, these ideas were taking greater and greater root. But there was still a certain generation of parents who didn't open up to the idea and still lived by the children are seen and not heard mantra. Not that no one had loving and emotionally available parents back then, it was just not yet the fully accepted method of raising children. Whereas nowadays, most people believe that if you don't nurture your child emotionally, you are not just a bad parent, you are an abusive parent. And even though experts knew different by that point, some people still believed that if a child was bad, they were just bad. Or if a child struggled at school, they just weren't working hard enough. Even today, you still get people saying, back in my day, we knew how to raise kids, you parents today are too soft, and all I can say to that is, yeah. And didn't you, as the oldest girl, have to help take care of your younger siblings while your older brothers got to go out and do whatever they wanted? Did your mum smacking you with a belt actually stop you from fighting with your siblings or going out drinking with your friends? No? Okay, boomer. Whereas today we're more prone to thinking, well, why is this child struggling? Why is this kid lashing out? There has to be a reason. And oh boy did Jason have his reasons. But did the fans care about that? Nope, they killed him. And now we have Death in the Family. So let's take a look. Since this movie seems to be following the basic story, I'll use the format I used before of summarising the basic plot they both go by, then saying what I think each iteration did better, and what I think they did differently that just serviced their stories better. And P.S., I'm not going to talk about the interactive content, since it bears no resemblance to Death in the Family, and they are really more Elseworld stories. Also, do not buy the digital version of this, it doesn't have the interactive stuff, which is pretty much the whole reason to buy the thing, and without it, it's just a watered-down version of Under the Red Hood with a few extra scenes added. But there was enough in there to make it comparable to the comic, by this much. We start with Jason crossing the line with criminals, showing his emotional problems as well as his ruthless side. The only difference here being that, in the comic, Batman seems to be taking a feather-light approach to taking down criminals, and Jason is just being violent. Whereas in the movie, Batman seems to have a much better reason for getting angry at Jason for being too rough.
We needed him. He would have talked, but you put him into shock.
This sparks a really interesting moral debate between them, which we'll get into more when we start talking about what the movie did better. Bruce has a conversation with Alfred about how it was a mistake to put Jason in the field while he was still grieving the loss of his parents. No shit. Bruce ultimately decides to avenge him, and Jason overhears this. Jason runs off on his own mission while Bruce is tracking some terrorists, and they meet up by chance, find out that their missions are connected, and that the Joker has been selling uranium to the terrorists Bruce has been tracking. As a result of this, they decide to team up. Batman ends up having to chase the terrorists alone, making Jason promise to wait for him. Which he doesn't. Joker beats Jason almost to death and leaves a bomb to finish the job. Batman arrives too late to save him, and we get this iconic image of him holding Jason in his arms. And this is where the two properties go in complete opposite directions. The movie goes on to tell the Red Hood story in the vein of Batman telling the story to Superman, whereas the comic continues following Batman in the aftermath of Jason's death. So I feel like the neutral section of this comparison is probably going to be the longest. But first let's look at what the movie did better. I really like the design of Jason here. I don't know what it is about comic books of this era that left so many artists unable to draw teenagers. The only thing they could think to do was to draw adults, but slightly shorter.
First class section or not, champ, you don't look ripe enough for rum. How about a straight Coke instead?
Don't look ripe enough. This guy looks like he could have a mortgage.
And maybe it's just an aesthetic preference on my part, but I just like the overall look of the movie. Though there are some things the comic did objectively better, which we'll get into. However, the major point in this movie's favour is that they managed to lay out Jason's point of view on criminals and crime fighting a lot better.
I know that he shot Barbara through the spine, but you only put that waste of life back in his cell. Well, he's broken out. Again. And someone had to do something.
Jason.
Whereas the comic shows him as understandable and sympathetic, but entirely misguided. They also quite brilliantly make it seem like this is a moral argument Bruce and Jason have been having for a long time, showing an ideological divide between two people who really care about each other. But my favourite thing the movie did was in that earlier scene where Bruce is talking to Alfred. They don't only discuss how Bruce may have been wrong in the way he handled Jason, but it draws direct parallels between Bruce and Jason's experiences.
I had years, and you, Alfred, to help me come to terms with the murder of my parents. I must have been crazy to put Jason in the field before he'd recovered from his loss.
Even the dreaded Wayne Crime Alley flashback has a place here, as it appropriately makes a point about vigilantism and questions whether Bruce's father would have actually been proud of him.
I'm not so sure a masked vigilante would be welcomed in Gotham City.
Right, onto the comic. I know I said I like the movie design better, but there is no denying. The comic has so much more personality. Look at these colours. And though I can't put too much blame on the movie, as it had the budget of an office Christmas party and was mostly reworked Red Hood scenes with a Batman monologue slapped on top, but I can't help but feel saddened by the fact that we are not going to get a fully realised version of this story. The movement of these fight scenes would be outstanding in animation, and that iconic image of the crowbar descending, while as well done as possible in Under the Red Hood, is a bit less impactful than it is here. I mean, look at these panels. I think the progression of the Joker's emotion here is hilarious.
I've got to sell the store and try to find another line of work.
Carmen, stop it! Wait, I just felt like playing a little violin, Kev.
The next point I want to make is that while Jason's point of view was done better in the movie, his character journey was so much better in the comic. And again, this isn't really the movie's fault, it just is what it is. Jason's story in the comic is about a yearning to belong somewhere. It's a story about his journey to find his mother. You see, after Jason overhears Bruce's conversation with Alfred, he walks around for a while and ends up in his old apartment building where a neighbour gives him a box of his parents' old documents. While going through this stuff, he finds his birth certificate, and though his mother's name is smudged, he sees that it begins with an S, meaning Catherine Todd wasn't his biological mother. And before I go any further, I just want to say that I am quite uncomfortable with the way they keep referring to this unknown woman as Jason's real mother. They don't just do it once. That is how they refer to her throughout the entire comic. His real mother, Jason's real mother. And I don't know what it is about so many people seeming to believe that blood is that important when it comes to family. And this is coming from someone who is part of one of the most nuclear of nuclear families you can possibly imagine. Barring fertility issues, any man can get a woman pregnant. Any woman can push out a baby. That does not make you a parent. Catherine Todd may have been an addict, she may have not been a great mother, but she loved Jason. She raised Jason. Catherine Todd is Jason's real mother. And it is particularly strange to see this in the Bat family, which is basically the pinnacle of found family. I mean, only one of Bruce's kids is biologically his, and that is the one he spent the least amount of time raising. And I know this sparks a conversation among Bat family fans about which of Bruce's kids is legally his, because back when Dick was Robin, people found it weird that a single man would adopt a child, but by the time Jason came along, it was considerably more acceptable. And while it is still rare today, it's not something anyone's going to look twice at. So the Bat family is a really interesting example of how families are so much more complicated than just this person gave birth to me, therefore she's my mother. This person is someone my mother also gave birth to, therefore they're my sibling, etc., etc. Anyway, back to Death in the Family. His father's address book gives him 3 potential mothers, like every woman his father ever knew was in his address book, one of which is Lady Shiva? Now, wouldn't that have been something? Shiva and the other women turn out to be false leads, but third time's a charm, and congratulations, Dr. Sheila Haywood, it's a boy. And this leads me to the next thing the comic has over the movie, Jason's motivation to go after the Joker. The narrative surrounding Jason's death, to this day, is that Jason was just a reckless brat that just went after the Joker willy-nilly, whereas that's not true at all. He went after the Joker because the Joker had abducted his mother. And while this was still a reckless thing to do, it is considerably more noble than he has been given credit for. Honestly, just the injustice this character has received throughout the years, and even continues to receive to a lesser degree to this day, is infuriating to me. So Jason goes after the Joker to rescue his mother, which doesn't turn out well for him as she turns him over to the Joker to save her own life. This backfires on her as the Joker, after beating Jason half to death, leaves them both to explode in the warehouse. And Jason, being the good, brave, kind-hearted kid that he is, still tries to save her. They both struggle and try to get out of the warehouse, but it's too late. And before finding Jason's body, Batman finds Sheila, who tells him what happened, and dies regretful. And lastly, let's go through what both properties did better to service their respective stories. The first thing I want to comment on is the design of the Joker. The comic has the more slim, slimy version we're more familiar with, whereas Under the Red Hood and as a result Death in the Family has a more thug-like design. And I know a lot of people didn't like this design, and I didn't either at first, but it grew on me. The Joker is usually a plotter, a schemer. He makes bombs, he throws gas on people, he even takes hostages and uses knives and guns on occasion. But this is one of the most physically brutal things he has done. So it makes sense to design him as more of a bruiser here. But I still put this in the neutral section because I think both designs work equally well. Okay, so I thought about how to do this, but it's going to be pretty hard to compare the rest of these properties. So I'm just going to summarise both of them and make points where I can. Batman starts narrating the story of Under the Red Hood, which goes thusly. A new crime lord turns up in Gotham and gets all the dealers under his control, pissing off Black Mask. Batman chases this new crime lord, trying to uncover the mystery of who he is. And he seems to be taunting Bruce with his past failings, and he knows all of Batman's tricks. And in case you haven't guessed already, it's Jason. Now, some of you might be saying, how? While most of you are probably thinking it's comic books, of course he's alive. But for those of you in the former category, Bruce goes to Ra's al Ghul, who admits to reviving Jason using the Lazarus Pit because he felt guilty for hiring the Joker, leading to the brutal, senseless death of not only a child, but the son of a man he greatly respects. Now, this is an interesting deviation here. As revealed in 2006's Infinite Crisis Secret Files, Jason is alive because Superboy Prime punched reality. And that's it. Superboy Prime punches reality, a bunch of things get reset, and Jason's death is one of them. God, I love comics. But the involvement of the League of Assassins is not unprecedented here, as 2010's Red Hood Lost Days shows that after Jason crawled out of his grave and was wandering around almost catatonic, he was found by the League of Assassins, who recognised him and took him. He is pretty unresponsive, and Raish pretty much gives up that he'll amount to anything, but Talia, for a couple of complicated reasons, revives him using the Lazarus Pit. The parts of the movie that aren't Red Hood animation are mostly just Batman monologuing to Superman, and I know that will be annoying to people who wanted more. Hell, I wanted more, but they do bring up some pretty interesting insights as to what must have been going through Batman's mind at the time.
It was always a contest with Jason, him against the world. Even dying didn't teach him he was wrong.
In Gotham, Black Mask breaks the Joker out of Arkham to deal with the Red Hood because Red Hood is actually the Joker's former alias. Debate the psychological implications of that at your leisure. This doesn't go well for Black Mask, and the Joker gets captured by Jason, leading to the greatest emotional confrontation in all of comics. I could get into how beautifully crafted and all-round perfect this scene is, but since we only really get to see it properly in Under the Red Hood, I'll have to save that for another day. So to summarise,
Jason said he'd forgiven me for not saving him that night, but that I didn't avenge his death afterward, that I didn't kill Joker, was a betrayal he could not live with. He wanted to look me in the eye while forcing me to make a choice: kill Joker, or kill Jason to stop him from killing Joker.
Again, I guess Batman's monologue could be considered annoying, but I really like some of the things included here. Batman is a character who is often hard to read emotionally. So since this is a one-off insight brought about in one of the most emotionally charged moments of Bruce's life,
Ready to drag that kid through fire, through hell, and back, to show him once and for all his contest wasn't with the world, it was with himself.
I think it's pretty cool. Jason blows up the building and disappears, leaving Bruce to unload his feelings onto Superman. Now, everyone associates Death in the Family with the murder of Jason, and not much more than that. I know I had gotten it into my head that Death in the Family ended with the death of Jason, but that's just about 3/4 of the comic. After Jason's funeral, we see Bruce start to change from a serious but still hopeful person into the more somber, reclusive person most people associate with Batman. I explained in my long Halloween video how this transformation took place outside the comics with new writers and a new creative direction, but I like to think that in canon, losing Jason is what changed Batman. Again, really creative artwork as we see Bruce with loved ones, spend a third of a page just focusing on him walking away, and then cut to him working alone. The best Batman comics put emphasis on the moral debate of the no-killing rule, and Batman actually fully intends to kill the Joker. But we find out that he's the UN ambassador to Iran. Don't ask me. I don't know. And therefore has diplomatic immunity. This puts Batman in a difficult position. Take out a dangerous man who is never going to change, or avoid a potentially catastrophic international incident. It really plays with morality and the injustice of the world. It basically says, play by the rules and you get screwed. Joker plans to blow up the UN for reasons. Scratch that, no reasons. We actually get to see Superman be sneaky and use his brain. Even Batman is impressed. Superman ultimately trusts Batman to handle it, but after a long chase, the Joker disappears and things are left appropriately unresolved. Because with Batman, they are never resolved. The goal of wiping out crime is one he will never achieve because it is unachievable. So I think this is the best answer to the question, what would Batman do if he was ever pushed too far? This is something best left unresolved. And if any of you are wondering what I actually think of Death in the Family, the interactive movie, then it's probably worth checking out just for the novelty of it. But the actual Death in the Family story which keep in mind is all you're going to get if you buy the digital version, while what it does add is interesting, it really just regurgitates what we've already seen from these characters. And I would really, really love to see a fully realised Death in the Family movie, because Jason Todd has been hidden away for far too long. He is such a great character that deserves so much more attention. So everyone, thank you for listening. Please consider donating to my Patreon or liking and subscribing. And the next video, I promise we will be going back to the DC AMU with Suicide Squad Hell to Pay. I'm really sorry I pushed that a little bit further back because I had to talk about Jason, but no, I have no regrets.